my name's Julie Wasilewski, and today I'm going to be talking about, for my final presentation, the daily lifestyle of a Buddhist, whether that be the layperson or that of the ordinary individual that just adheres to and believes in Buddhism. And specifically, we're going to be talking about Theravada Buddhism. And before I begin, Buddhism not only represents an ancient philosophy and tradition within each respective culture across the globe, but it also represents the lineage of thousands of years of practices and principles which have really guided and impacted millions of individuals in their daily life. And through this impaction, and it translates to how these individuals dictate their diet and their avoidance of forbidden practices, which have been stipulated by the Buddha, and as well as a reverence for the Buddha and his practices and his principles that he or the enlightened being has taught. Right, and we'll first start with the two main principles and ideas that Buddhists particularly believe in, which is the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. So first, we'll start with the noble truth of inherently to live is to suffer. So the Buddha himself began life, the very first Buddha began life as somebody who was unaware of the suffering that plagued the world throughout the daily life. And when he discovered this problem of suffering, he saw the tragedy that suffering inherently was attached to human existence, where human existence humans inherently crave and desire, and they keep desiring, and this endless cycle of suffering is something that just happened all the time. And he discovered this and was hoping to find the source, and as well as a way to stop this suffering and this process, which inherently leads to the second stage or second truth, is the origin of suffering, which is attachment. The Buddha determined that the origin of human suffering was that of cravings and desires, and attachment to the earthly pleasures and sensualities that inherently make and wish for individuals to continuing to desire and continuing to not have their goals and dreams and desires not be reached, which sometimes they don't, and all of our desires and suffering and goals and dreams cannot be inherently reached. It's just impossible. And because of this, we inherently just continue to suffer, and because of it. And it's through this endless cycle of just desire and greed and endless suffering that the Buddha wished to stop and find a way to break the cycle. And that leads to the third noble truth, which is the cessation of suffering, which is which is possible. And the Buddha makes it known that the end to suffering is possible through the detachment from attachment. And that, it sounds weird, but the detachment from earthly tethers, and the detachment from uh, anything that holds you to your existence and to yourself, which inherently lead to evil and bad karma and good karma, or anything. Once you detach yourself from it all, you'll find yourself in a new enlightened state, or a nirvana, which I'll talk about later in this presentation. And once you break apart and break away from it, you'll be able to step away from suffering and find yourself in a new enlightened state. And which leads now to the fourth noble truth, which is the path to cessation of suffering. So the path of cessation can be achieved and found and made through the Eightfold Path. And it is this Eightfold Path and inherently the Four Noble Truths. Once understanding these new truths and following the Eightfold Path, that an individual can reach enlightenment and reach this nirvana in the state of being away from suffering. Sorry, I have allergies at the moment. All right, and so now I'm going to talk about the Eightfold Path and what each stage necessarily means, though you don't have to follow this step-by-step basis. You can always achieve and undergo these processes throughout your life, and you can achieve one over the other. They are all on the equal plane, especially the last two, which relate to meditation. But it's more which the path of which is best is the one stated, but you can achieve them in any order you would like. So the first stage is on the Eightfold Path, really the first step as portrayed by the Eightfold Wheel, the stepped wheel, which also portrays how each little point is one of the eightfold stages. And the right view is where when you see in the right perspective of not trying to attach yourself based on sight, based on like craving through craving aesthetics and craving what you see, you can come into the right perspective of detaching yourself away from desire and craving. Excuse me, sorry. So the right thought is the next stage, and the thoughts, which inherently thoughts determine actions and the acquisition of karma, which I'll also talk about in the next couple slides. I think it's the next slide. And through actions, you can control which thoughts you do and how thoughts determine who you are, and how these actions determine how you stop the processes of detaching, stop the processes of suffering and wanting and desire. And so this leads to the third stage, which is the right speech, which is to speak truth and avoid slander, refrain from abusive languages, which, sorry, the right speech will inherently lead to speaking truth and speaking more of a balanced word in the sense, and so you don't actively try to harm yourself or harm others. And the right action, so the right action, the fourth stage, is to behave peacefully and harmoniously with yourself and with others, whether it is to not steal, to not kill, to not overindulge in sensual pleasures. It is through these that you'll be able to stop suffering in that area of you'll never have to harm or do yourself harm. All right, and the fifth stage is the right of livelihood, where an individual must work hard and must achieve their livelihood, their bread and their butter, their wealth, their food, honestly, and through hard work, without eliciting, without stealing, without illegal action, without trying to achieve a higher social status illegally. The sixth stage is the right effort, and it's the effort of trying to control thoughts to be more positive and to inherently try to make them more of something that don't inherently lead to negativity and craving and desire. So, like I said before, this last two stages relate to meditation and are important and inherently imperative, for the active and the right state of going into meditation. So the seventh, or the right mindfulness, is the focus mentally on emotion and mental faculties during the process of meditation. And stage 8, or the right concentration, is achieving this right state of being and state of mind that avoids earthly distractions and earthly tethers to the world during meditation, which could drive away the process of finding enlightenment. All right, after the Eightfold Path and the Noble Truths, which fall under mostly Theravada Buddhism, it's now I'm going to talk about the principles that a couple other principles that uh, Buddhism that Buddhists follow uh, as Theravadan Buddhists. So the first bullet point I have there is Anatman, and the Anatman is the soul. It's the word for soul, and this relates to the 5 aggregates of human existence and what determines human existence. I apologize, sorry. And these 5 aggregates are material body, the physical body, the feelings that you feel every day and feel, and what you acquire throughout your day and throughout your life, your perceptions, what you sense, and your predispositions or the karma that you acquire through action, whether good or bad, as well as the consciousness or the state within yourself, the inner being, your mind. So the Anatman relates to that the Buddha, in Buddhism generally, especially in Theravada Buddhism, that there is no state of a permanency of soul, where the soul is always ever changing and always moving, and not always just within the body and within oneself or within a specific plane. And because of this, it's the denial of the permanent self that life can be defined by the anatman, the dukkha or suffering, and the anadya, because of this, it inherently leads to and helps you understand that the cycle of existence is a result of the dependent origination of the soul and the 12 chains of causation, which lead to the creation of samsara, or the cycle of rebirth. All right, and the second bullet point I'm going to talk about is karma, which inherently is throughout all Buddhism, but especially in Theravada Buddhism. You can see the theme. All right, so karma is the ethical actions and consequences which lead to rebirth. Any actions, it doesn't have to be ethical, really. It can be any action of any kind, whether good or bad, that leads to the creation and the exhibition and falling into the cycle of rebirth. And in a sense, it can be established that karma is sort of a universal justice system. It's not really a divine principle that a divine being is exuding justice based on what he or she or what it really determines as good or bad. It's more of a natural moral law and more of a natural moral code that all life has to abide by, and it will determine by itself what is good and bad. And because of this, karma also determines more than just that you will be reborn. It will determine how you'll be reborn and what you will be reborn into, such as even what species you'll be born into, such as if a human is reborn into an animal or a spirit or a god and such, as well as how beautiful that person or individual or whatever being could be, how beautiful they are, how attractive they could be, as well as how long they'll live in that reborn life, as well as the intelligence, social status, wealth of that individual. So a human could be reborn into a new human with a different social status and wealth. So that's all for karma. For the third point I wanted to talk about is nirvana. Nirvana makes its appearance throughout Buddhism. However, particularly in Theravada Buddhism, it's the ultimate goal, and it's the ultimate release from the suffering of existence. And it's more of a state of being rather than a set plane that you can rise to and seek out. It's not necessarily like a heaven, it's more of once an individual has become enlightened, they are always eternally in this state of being. And it's this state of being that you find a absence of greed, hatred, and ignorance, though you can still feel it from outside environments. You don't necessarily feel it within yourself. You can, it creates a more of an impartiality that many Buddhas do represent, that they don't necessarily feel suffering, but they understand it and know how to stop suffering. And it is this enlightened state that beings of enlightenment will burn off their karma. Well, they'll not necessarily die and pass on into the cycle of rebirth. They'll more burn off their karma until their final moment of death, which is death, sorry. And they will then go into the stage of parinirvana, which is the final stage where they will break eternally the complete cycle of rebirth, and they will be eternally in the state of enlightenment. And this is right after they have died. I didn't make that clear enough. So in Theravada Buddhism, these enlightened beings are known as arhats, or the worthy ones, and these worthy ones go off and will always be like saints that exude a sort of attribute of Buddhism, and they will exude the attributes and the characteristics of importance and enlightenment, and how that can be achieved throughout one's life. And they will teach that to other individuals. However, the ultimate goal may be to reach enlightenment and nirvana. It may particularly not be able to be reached by certain individuals, depending on their circumstance. And because of this, there is a lesser goal in Theravada Buddhism. Though it is the lesser goal, you can still achieve it. And it's this lesser goal of acquiring a good enough and a great amount of karma, of good karma in particular, that will lead to a better rebirth into something more of a better state in which you are in the moment. So you'll be reborn to something better than what you are. And it's the cult, and through that, you can reach this better state of rebirth through the acquisition of good karma, through the cultivation of 4 specific attitudes or palaces of Brahmas. And you cultivate it through loving kindness, you cultivate it through exuding compassion and joy and equanimity, especially. And once you exude these 4 palaces, you'll be able to really absorb a bunch of good karma that can create a new and lead to a new state of rebirth. And through these 4 palaces, you'll be able to also overcome the 3 roots of evil, which is lust, delusion, hatred, and those 3. All right, after this slide, we have the daily practices. Though it's not to be taken as strictly every culture follows the same regimen, and every monastery also follows the same time schedule. And this is only an example of a specific schedule that could be used at other other Buddhist monasteries, specifically Theravada Buddhism. So first we have the 4 a.m. wake-up call and the meditation for an hour, and then also another hour following of chanting. As well, we have the 6 a.m. Walk barefoot around the neighborhood, gaining, meriting gifts that people will offer them. And though they can receive gifts, they can never ask for them. And this is usually where Buddhist monks and lay people will acquire their supplies and food for their monastery. And at 8 a.m., they will return to the temple, and the monks will sit together and eat breakfast, and they'll make a blessing for world peace or any other blessing that they wish to talk about, such as ending world hunger, water crisis, global warming, such as those. Excuse me, sorry. But then after, that'll take about 3 hours, maybe 4 hours, and then it'll be right before noon or right at noon that some monks, not all monks, depending on what they want to do, is they will choose to eat a light lunch, not usually very heavy because this is the only meal they'll have before sunrise the next morning. And they'll eat really light lunch. They'll be able to eat usually vegetarian diet, and then this will then lead to the 1 p.m. classes, usually led by the eldest monk or the oldest monk, especially in Theravada Buddhism. And then some monks may also attend outside the temple at specific institutions or in other schools outside of the temple. This will take about 5 hours, and it will be at like 6 p.m. Usually a 2-hour session of meditation and prayer will then begin. And then this will then lead to the 8 p.m. Where monks will then retire to do their daily duties as taking care of the temple, cleaning up, doing whatever they need to do, and their responsibilities and their homework that they are assigned at the monastery. And this is just a general time scale of what a monk or a nun or a lay person could do throughout their their daily life at that specific day. And it's not to be confused with individuals of just a normal state where they're not devoted to the lay lifestyle. Just specifically, I'm talking about monks and nuns. So this next slide we see here is the diet and eating habits. And for most, if not all of Buddhism, there's a specific adherence to no killing of any sentient being, and that's specific to eating meat of any kind, especially pork. And Buddhists cannot kill or eat that meat, even if they didn't kill, they still shouldn't. If they didn't even kill the animal that is to be consumed, they cannot eat it. And no alcohol or intoxicants of any kind, which could lead to the craving and desires of just further desires and craving of more and more in that sense. And this next little bullet point I have is onions, garlic, scallions, chives, and leeks. These are the 5 particular kinds of spices, sorry, that's the word, that can lead to hunger and more anger and craving. And they are usually forbidden in specific cultures such as China and some other, and it's really specific to those cultures. It's kind of dependent on where a Theravada Buddhist can be and what they want. This is not inherently forbidden in all places, but in China specifically, yeah, you can't eat these 5 things if you want to really adhere to Buddhist principles. This 4th is specific to Theravada Buddhism in the sense in specific places such as Thailand and Vietnam, where those are they do eat meat in those countries. It just depends specifically on if the meat was not prepared specifically for the individual that is to consume it, and if the individual had not been in any way involved in the slaughter of the beast that you are to eat, then you can eat it. And if you are like an unexpected guest and meat was to be prepared at that dinner or wherever you are to be at, you can't eat it. You can eat it. And if you are an expected guest and meat is to be involved, specifically pork, you can't eat it. There's a very specific circumstances that you can and cannot eat in specific places. All right, and this leads now to my final slide. It's the bibliography. 6 sources were used throughout this presentation, and I hope you enjoy. Thank you so much.